Dr. Jensen, I guess I'd like to start off a little bit and just, tell us a little bit about where you from, where'd you grow up, do you have a wife, kids, any of that stuff? Where'd you go to school?
I don't know if you ever saw Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Christmas special.
Yes.
That's pretty much my life. I grew up in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, middle child of 5. My dad was my hero. My mom was my best friend. Ended up graduating from Sleepy Eye Public High School. Sleepy Eye was a lot like the West Side Story. If you were Protestant, you better live on the south side of the tracks, and if you were Catholic, you better live on the north side of the tracks. So it was just a really fun place to grow up, and I think typically in our employment situations is where we really became integrated. I worked at Del Monte, and that's how I got through college. I worked at the Orchid Inn and cleaned the bathrooms and had a chance to work with all of my Catholic friends on the north side of the tracks because I lived on the south side of the tracks. Then I went to the University of Minnesota, had a good time there, graduated with a degree in physiology. I spent a year in dental school, and I enjoyed a lot about that, except I found that I really didn't have much of a love affair with teeth, so that was a problem. So I did the logical thing. If you've been heavily embedded in the sciences and you don't like dental school, you go to the seminary.
You do.
So I went to the seminary, and I made 2 big decisions that year. I was dating this really hot chick, and I decided to ask her to marry me. And we've been together 43 years and have 3 wonderful children. And Christy is she's an anesthesiologist. Matt's an estate attorney, and Jackie's a family doc. And my wife's she's had a wonderful career in veterinary medicine, treating exotics and cats and dogs. And then I've been a family doc for 35 years.
Oh, wow.
I'm writing about a book called What the Heck's Going On? We're Being Played. And that's the book right now. The first book 5 years ago was Relationship Matters, and it talked about the fracturing between patients and physicians, and the fact that I don't think physicians are really tuned into the notion of making sure that patients are their own best champion. We've become so enamored with ourselves that I think we've forgotten that there are many partners out there for a patient to utilize in that pursuit of optimal health. Too often, I think Western medicine has 2 things to offer. We're either going to cut on you or we're going to put you on a pill. But there are so many other things that can go into that equation, whether it be chiropractic, acupuncture, information, nutrition, physical therapy. There are so many other things that we should and could be doing. And I think we've lost our way. And I think COVID-19 has really put a bright, shining light on that, showing how fractured that relationship is. I think a lot of patients feel absolutely abandoned by their doctors because they're not able to have the conversations that they want to have.
Yeah,
I was reading an article last evening about even the origin of oseltamivir, which is Tamiflu, and that's a drug we've used for the influenza virus for years, and it's a modestly impactful drug. It probably more than anything shortens the span of days you have symptoms, but it doesn't cure you or anything like that. But its origins were Chinese medicine. And I think that the more we open ourselves to those kinds of discoveries, I think sometimes new discoveries come from old discoveries. And the more we do that, I think we're going to serve our patients better. And patients, I think we can make a difference in the way we deal with public health emergencies. Arguably, we have had a pandemic or an epidemic virtually every other year for the last 20 years. We can go back to the SARS-CoV-1 in 2002. We can talk about MERS. We could talk about the swine flu in 2009. We could talk about the multiple outbreaks of Ebola over the last 12 years. Bottom line is we have to ask ourselves, what have we done well this time around, and what could we have done better? I think lockdowns fairly early on revealed that we weren't getting what we thought we'd get from them. A one-size-fits-all program isn't working. We need to lean into the doctors more. I think we had too many unelected bureaucrats who find this to be, this is my time. They rose to the occasion by being more proclaiming and certain than they had any right to be. I made a video yesterday, Chris, where I said, we don't know what this new South African variant is going to be, but sometimes we just have to let the science breathe, and we have to just follow it. And I think in doing that, I don't think we have to come across as know-it-alls. I think it's okay to tell the public, we're not sure. The doctors are working hard. I remember when public officials decided to ignore natural immunity, They had no idea how they were fracturing the public trust. They created two groups, the vaccinated and unvaccinated. But the fact of the matter is, Chris, you and I know that if someone has a robust antibody response, they've got immunity. We should have been far more open with the public. And I think that groupthink drove a lot of the decision making. And ultimately, the supply chain of our healthcare workers was fractured because of poor public policy. So those are some things I think we could have done a lot differently. I really think that Minnesota is looking for something different. I think at some level there's a certain rejection of what's gone on over the last 22 months. But at another level, it's really not what Minnesotans are against. It's what they're for. And they're for an approach that isn't one size fits all. They're for an approach that respects every Minnesotan, every area of Minnesota. I mean, the bottom line is farmers want to farm, teachers want to teach, miners want to mine, business people want to run their businesses. They want to do that without any unnecessary intrusion into their lives or their businesses by government or any other agency. And they just don't feel that's been happening. So I think Minnesotans are charged up to say, we can be so much more than we are right now, but the only way that happens is if we get unleashed and we feel like we've been constrained. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine asked me, he said, Scott, if the campaign ended tomorrow for whatever reason and you were done, you were out of the picture, how would you feel about what you've done so far? And I told him, I said, I'd feel blessed because the last 9 months have absolutely been inspiring and uplifting because there's a lot of really good folks in Minnesota. Sometimes I think the media presents a side of Minnesota that really isn't accurate. I think there are so many solid, hardworking Minnesotans that aren't dreaming of being billionaires. What they're dreaming of is raising good kids or helping raise good grandkids. They want their kids to be in a situation where the kids can dream dreams and then go pursue those dreams. It's been heartwarming. So when you get elected, you should feel like you just got the job that you applied for. And now you have to prove yourself. Go out and get stuff done. If I get elected, in the first 100 days, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to rewrite emergency powers so that it never happens again where we have an emperor running the state. I want to pass a constitutional carry bill. I want to pass a stand your ground bill. I want to pass voter ID. And I want to pass student choice. We do those 5 things. Now we're cooking with real gas. Then we'll focus on the budget process, which is broken anyway. And we have to be ready to make the hard decisions. Budgeting in Minnesota has gone from a $30 billion biennial budget in 2010 to a $52 billion budget in this last one. That's a 75% increase in little more than a decade. During that time, the average wage earners increase was about 25%, but the government went up 75%. That's just not sustainable.
So what would you cut?
Well, health and human services and K through 12 education both have tremendous amount of money. 42% of the budget goes to K through 12 education and approximately 32% to health and human services. Now that in and of itself, you might say, well, that sounds a little heartless. So I think we always have to look at context, comparisons. If you look at Minnesota, right now in 4th and 8th grade reading and arithmetic, many of our students score less well than students in Mississippi. I'm not dinging Mississippi. I'm just saying that's a fact. What does Mississippi spend per student? $9,000. What do we spend? $13,500, about 150% of theirs. So there's plenty of money. We just need to unleash our teachers so that they can do the job that they want to do. Same thing with, if you look at the typical welfare recipient, in Minnesota, it's $30,500 per person. Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, none of those states get to $20,000. So there's enough money there. So when we look at health and human services and we look at K through 12, there's opportunities to be more fiscally responsible than we have been. I did a video a couple weeks ago about a young man who was really in a dead-end school district for him. It was a good school district, but the emphasis, the flavor, the culture just didn't work for him. Mm-hmm. So he and his parents met, decided to change school districts, and he got into a school district that had a bigger focus on hands-on learning rather than just from a cathode ray tube or just reading. And I think that's just a really good example of how every person learns differently. And school choice would allow parents to identify, how is my child going to do best? See more of those kind of things. We could see more private schools, more religious-based or non-religious-based private schools. We could see more immersion schools. We could see parents getting involved. We could see our education system going back to what we originally thought it should be, foundational and not indoctrination. So right now, I think the school choice is the next big idea that can literally unleash the student, but also unleash the parents. And with that parental unleashing, what you'll see is a drive to make our whole society better. We're seeing it right now with the mama bears and papa bears. They've gotten powerfully motivated because of their kids. But I'm convinced that that motivation is going to translate into more than just K through 12 education. They're getting involved in what does our society look like? What is America? What makes America great? I think we're going to see more and more that energy shape our culture, and frankly, we need that energy. I think our entire election process has to be re-examined. We could quibble about illegal vouching, harvesting of ballots, abuse of absentee ballots, the problems with mail-in ballots. We could look at the Maricopa County forensic audit that was done and see that in that area they had 282 dead people vote, that they had 9,000 more mail-in ballots returned than went out. We could go back to 2000 and look at the hanging chads. We could do all of that. But the bottom line is, if we don't have a fair and trustworthy election system, America loses one of its pillars of democracy. I want every American engaged and paying attention, just as you are with these repeat voter registrations. But if someone doesn't want to vote, or someone chooses not to do the research, I'm not particularly crazy about the idea of someone else coming along and say, hey, I'll give you $10 for your ballot. Let me vote for you. Mm-hmm. We just have to say, why in the world would we want a system that isn't as good as it could be? And then fix it. And to me, a voting card, a photo ID, along with provisional ballots for those exceptional situations, that's the way to fix this. And I just don't understand how anybody could argue with that.
It's funny, the whole rent control thing, because, we have a lot of investors that own investment properties and stuff there, and it shifts their mindset to, if you have a long-standing tenant, a lot of times you're not raising rents and stuff on them because they're the perfect tenant. They always pay in time. They take care of the property. Like, keep those people in there, because if you got a 30-year fixed loan on there, your payment's not changing as the investor. You know what I mean? And so then why do you need to change your rent to your renters when you got a super good long-term tenant in there? Mm-hmm. But now the problem is that if that renter leaves, you can't increase your rents to whatever the market rents are at that time. Now you can only increase it to 3%. So now you have to increase rents to your long-term renters there that you've had in there that you don't want to do that on, because that's the only way you're going to be able to keep up, so that when they leave, now you're back into market rents for that property. And so there's a lot of, like you said, unintended consequences, and I mean, we see it all the time.
I think, to be fair, pretty much everyone had that criticism of the St. Paul proposal, is that it didn't have any sort of decompression for new construction and any of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And already they're trying to work on it. Well, what we really wanted was, and ultimately speaking, I think that those things about the St. Paul ordinance will change because of all the developments that's happening right now. So.
Absolutely.
I'd be curious to see what plays out with that.
Mike, I think your explanation was excellent, because I do have some rental properties, and I have wonderful tenants, and I'm not interested in necessarily having rent increase every year based on the consumer price index increase. My tenants, in many situations, I say, hey, let's just stay with where we're at because you've been so good. But if I do that, just as you said, down the road, I may pay for that decision because when that tenant moves on, I'm stuck at a place where I don't want to be.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Jensen, if folks are listening, they're watching online, we're on YouTube, Facebook, of course on the air, where's the best way that they can connect with you, and how do they follow what you're doing and where you're going to be?
I hope that people would think about just joining us on Facebook or Instagram. Our YouTube channel has most of our videos as well. We're pretty active on Twitter, and we're getting back up on TikTok. We've been booted off of TikTok twice. Once when we had 300,000 followers and once when we had 75,000 followers. And it was simply because we had spoken a contrarian narrative. But the best place to follow us is probably Facebook. I also would love you to go to our website, drscottjensen.com. I'm not going to be the darling choice of the political elite. That's been clear. Typically, politicians who are willing to kiss the ring or be a puppet on a string are going to be more attractive to the people who drive the industry. And I think I've made it fairly clear that that's not who I am. I'm willing to be a maverick. There are times when that willingness to be a maverick backfires, and I find myself perhaps doing more damage control than I would like. But part of that comes with being willing to lead on a conversation. I learn every day. Certainly there are weeks where by Friday I realize that what I said on Monday could have been wiser or more sage. But I do think that if you're willing to think about being a delegate for our team, we need you to go to drscottjensen.com/join the fight with no spaces, join the fight, and let us know that you're going to go to precinct caucuses.